We have Professor Ashwini Chhatre here from ISB. Please welcome him first with a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
So I think this is a great opportunity for us all to learn about a new industry, about a new sector that we've been sort of started working in for some time now, and we'll be expanding on and scaling in. So I'll maybe start with a little bit of an intro for Sir. We usually try to avoid doing long intros, but Sir, this definitely needs to be read out. So Sir is a very respected scholar with interest areas in natural resource governance, economic development, and environmental conservation. He currently serves as the Executive Director of Bharti Institute of Public Policy, which is under the Indian School of Business, and he's also the Associate Professor for Economics there. He studied economics himself from Delhi University and has done a PhD in political science from Duke University. Sir has spent about 11 years, and I'm sure more and counting, on the ground working with communities very closely, and has a very rich experience of just working with a lot of different communities across the country, right? So welcome, Sir. I think we can start by hearing from you about your journey, what got you to this point at ISB and where you started. I think we'll all love to have more context about you.
Thank you, Tannya. First, I will let you know that I have not been knighted yet, so you can stop calling me Sir. There are many other options. I can tell you a few. It's been a long journey, and it's been a very eventful, exciting journey. Like you said, I graduated from Delhi University in economics. I went to school and college in Delhi. It was a very different city then, much better. After my college and before my PhD, I spent more than a decade working in many different parts of India, largely around forests, but also focusing on the question of rights, and rights to land, rights to forest, workers' rights, women's rights, and so on. I was a trade union organizer for most of that time, and mobilizing communities to protest against what a lot of us believed were their constitutional entitlements. So I come from a place of empathy for those who live in or near forests. This was mostly in central India, but I also spent many years working in the Himalayas. That informed my higher education, my PhD, which was on what helps communities cooperate to protect forests. It was, I spent 13 years in the United States. After doing my PhD, I started teaching there. I embarked on an academic career, while always striving to find a way to come back to India. And eventually, of course, ISB provided me with a great opportunity, particularly with the very new nascent Bharti Institute. So ISB has a number of research centers and institutes with a specific mandate. So there is one on data science, one on health, one on manufacturing, and so on. This was in public policy. And the idea was to take research that happens in an academic institution like ISB and engage with external stakeholders. And in this case, it was everything, because public policy is basically everything. Right? So as the executive director of the Bharti Institute, I have tremendous license that ISB has given me, and the fantastic support that I get there. So for the last 11 years, I have been at ISB, and I have been trying to build a program of action. And there are sort of multiple areas, vectors, verticals, whichever way we want to see it. Forests is one of the important ones, and of course the closest to my heart based on my my prior experiences and priorities. I love working with, well, I am a birder myself, which started when I was in college in Delhi. I love walking a lot, and I continue to do that on an everyday basis, and not on a treadmill either. And I would rather walk where I can interact with real people rather than in an isolated, sort of protected national park looking for tigers. There's nothing better than sort of working with people who live near forests. So it's in their backyard.
Yeah, thank you. Clearly, forests have been something of importance to you. You spent a lot of time working in forests, and with people who live in forests. We're also here to talk about forest-based commodities and supply chains. I think I just want to start by understanding why forests are so important. What brought you to this point of deciding to dedicate your work to forests, and why? How do we understand the importance they hold?
So I realized a long time ago, we are taught to sort of speak a language of choice and agency and domination. Why did I pick forests? I don't think so. I think forests picked me. And I just agreed. Sounds like a good idea. It was not a conscious choice between priorities, ki idhar jaun, ki udhar jaun. It was always there. It picked me. The why forest is derivative. Once I decide this is what I like to do, I will always be able to find sufficiently good reasons to be able to do it, right? So I can give you a lot of reasons why forests are important, and you can find them in many other places as well. But that is not why I work on forests. I work on forests because I love it. I enjoy myself doing it. And I also figured out a long time ago, if I want to do something that will have an impact, it will take a long time. And if I'm not enjoying myself, I will just burn out. So I better find something that I want to do for 40 years.
Yeah.
And this is it.
Yeah. I want to actually take this moment to ask all of you, if you can name one thing that you use in your daily lives that you know comes from forests directly. Any one thing that you use in your daily lives that comes from forests.
It's not a trick question.
I can start. Wood. There's wood in everything, right? So that's one. It's in our furniture. So absolutely anything basic like that.
Paper.
No? Paper. That's a very good one. Paper. Rubber. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually don't realize, but there are so many things that we end up using in our daily lives that are a direct produce of forest, right? And I was reading some data, and there are more than 100 million people in India who directly or indirectly derive their livelihoods.
200.
200. Okay, so thanks for the correction. Directly or indirectly derive their livelihoods from forests, right? And why that number is important is because if we compare it to, say, agri, I think the number there is similar. It's 170, 200 that we look at, right? And while agri is something that is so mainstream, is so talked about, and I think when we think of agri and we think of farmers, we all have this image in our heads of what that person looks like. Forests are something we never think about or talk about, and maybe we don't know enough about. So I think my question to you is, why is that? Why are forests something that have historically been ignored and not been a part of the mainstream conversation?
So a few corrections, if I may.
Sure.
Neither wood nor paper nor rubber come from forests. They used to, they don't anymore. Most of wood that you see is coming from bamboo or other pulpwood produced on private lands by farmers. that is a shift that happened quite abruptly sometime in the 1970s. You can sort of credit Chipko with it, but overall it was the end of a tremendously destructive era when we sort of grossly misused our forests through poor monitoring, bad licensing systems, just absent policy and so on. So we had a lot of good forest. We used it for industrial purposes, for paper, for wood, for rubber and so on. We destroyed it. And the environmental movement, partly as a result, as a response to that destruction, put a stop to it. And it took us 50 years of, one could say, increasing awareness and consciousness that we should never repeat that. That is an extremely irresponsible way of using our forests. What it did, however, and that is what I am now keen to overturn and disrupt, what it did was made the people who lived near and inside forests invisible. And forests became something that deserved our protection. And these 200 million people continued to live there. They were always there. That led to a very high spatial correlation of forests and poverty. So if you sort of lay the Adivasi map of India over the forest map of India and the poverty map of India, they all congregate. There are these clusters you will find all over India, north, south, center, wherever. And that is because when we look at forests, we don't see people. We only see trees or tigers or elephants and so on. And that needs to change because we have come a long way in figuring out how to not destroy forests. And we have had a lot of experience in collaborative management, where communities can be monitored, can be trained, their capacity can be improved to sustainably harvest forest products. All of this has happened almost in a silo, and therefore we don't hear or see any of it. All I am trying to do is sort of bring it into the limelight so that it is visible. It's all there.
Yeah.
One last important aspect there with respect to farmers. The 200 million people who live in or near forests are also farmers. They also cultivate crops. And the 200 million farmers that you refer to also use the forest.
Right.
The invisibility that happened to the forest dwelling people, the opposite happened to farmers. So we elevated the farmer to something that is singular. But if you look at the data today, there is a very small proportion of people who derive most of their livelihood from crops. Every farmer family is doing many things in order to maintain a livelihood.
Right.
They will grow some crops, they will also have some trees to sell, they will do some casual labor, particularly for small and marginal farmers. Without some wage labor, they will not be able to make their ends meet, and that is why Narega is so popular. So we call them farmers, but I mean, in my sort of analysis of the data, more than 50% of whom we call farmers make less than 50% of their income from crops.
Yeah.
So we need to rethink farmer also.
Yeah. So then tell us more about the communities that you work with in particular. These, under the initiative on forest economy, are these communities deriving more of their livelihoods from forest-based commodities and supply chains forest-based produce? Or what do they look like? And so we can all also sort of get a picture in our minds, right?
One, it is far more diversified. So there are more forest products, but you don't choose, they choose you. They are already there in the forest. You can't change them. You can collect them or not collect them. It's a yes or no. There's no other option. And just like crops, there are some good years and some not so good years, and I mean an occasional bad year. generally, the variability in sort of the output of a forest is far less than the variability of rain-fed farming. And because the diversification is greater, you can have 9 to 13 different products that you can collect and sell from the same forest. The security is slightly higher. But in contrast to what you can do on the farm, which is owned by a private farmer, so you can target, and there are there is the possibility of inputs, of technology, of different ways in which the farmer controls what comes out of the farm. The forest is a collective resource. So whatever needs to be done to increase the value that is extracted from the forest is just not something that an individual can control. And that is what I see, is that there are these communities. It's not that most of their income comes from forests. It's that the potential for increasing their incomes is the greatest from investment in forest products.
Okay. And what exactly are these products then? Because the ones that maybe we were mentioning are not relevant anymore. So tell us about what are some of the most important, economically important, maybe socially important for these communities, products that come out of the forest today that you also are specifically focusing on and working on?
So yes, so when you asked that question, I was waiting for the answers, and sort of the wood, paper and rubber is what I expected. Right? But the number of ingredients that come from forests in things that we use every day is tremendous. It's just written. So for example, there are extracts from in the kitchen. So trifala, for example, it's something that a lot of us eat, or at least our parents eat. Right? It's amla, behda and harda. It comes from forests. It is collected by women in a forest somewhere in central India, and by the time it gets to the formal economy, it's already 200 kilometers away. And that is where value is created.
Yeah.
Until then, it is all informal, completely disaggregated, and therefore invisible. What also happens is that, to take an example, just in Jharkhand alone, there are sort of 12 lakh hectares of standing sal forest, 1.2 million hectares. That's a lot of forest. Right? Usually we can't visualize what 1 million hectares of forest looks like. The seed of the sal tree produces a fat. The European Union has approved the use of sal butter, like shea butter, has approved the use of sal butter as a cocoa butter substitute, which means it can be used up to 5% as a substitute for cocoa butter in chocolates. So the chocolate you use already has 5% of something, but they don't disclose it because they are not required to disclose it, up to 5%. If it goes above that, then of course they have to disclose it. Of course, these are all political economy of food labeling problems that we all, both as consumers and businesses, struggle with. That is just one forest product. Amla, behda, harda, equal number of or volume of products of production that exists in many, many different parts of India that finds its way to the market and then finds its way into our kitchens. So the sal butter or sal fat is omnipresent in soaps, in hand lotions, in oils, right? We have all heard of the Dabur Amla Kesh Tel. Where do you think the amla comes from? There are so many products that come from forests, but they are not labeled as such. And it increases their invisibility. If we knew that it is called stearic acid, for example. I mean, stearic acid is not synthesized. It is derived from natural plant products. Of course, it can be synthesized, but this is much cheaper and better. And increasingly, consumers prefer chemicals that are derived from natural products, plant products. what we are trying to do and what we want your help in accomplishing it is making it visible. It's already there. And once it is visible, it sort of generates its own momentum because there will be demand. The demand is already there. And then we sort of push the value creation closer to the forest. And it's really not that hard. These are women who are using really Stone Age technology. So the sal seed is collected. I mean, sal seed has two wings. So when it falls from the tree, it's a beautiful sight. It's a very tall tree. And when it falls, it's a nature's trick. So the wings will take it far away. And they sort of rotate and fly. And there are many of them. When there is a breeze, many of them will start flying suddenly. Now the women have to collect this by hand. And this falls in May and June in central India. You can imagine, this is 45 degrees heat. They will sort of run through the walk through the forest, collect these seeds, bring them back, dry them, de-wing them by hand or by putting fire to it, because fire is a 100,000-year-old technology that is still unbeatable. Then they will dry them, break them on a stone. So they'll take one stone, put the seeds on it and break it with another stone. This is 10,000-year-old technology. Right? And all we need to do, there's no need for digital or very, very advanced technology at all. All we need is 19th century technology. Rollers had been invented in Manchester in the 18th century. All we need is two rollers that can be calibrated for the size of the kernel. And we are doing it now. The technology exists.
Right.
But it requires scale. Right? Every household cannot have a mechanical solution, right? Yeah. You need, if a machine has a throughput of 1 ton per day, you need sufficient number of women who can own one of these machines, and that will just reduce their drudgery and their labor so much, releasing them to do other things that are equally productive, but they have no time to do.
Yeah.
So just simple interventions, nothing very complicated.
And so under the initiative on forest economy, you're bringing this mechanization to these communities and helping them sort of derive more value from the produce that they already have available in the forest. Right?
So first we aggregate them because the economies of scale is critical. You can't do it at a self-help group. So 10 women is not enough, even 100 women is not enough. You need 1,000 women.
Yeah.
And then they need to be organized in a manner that allows them to actually exploit these economies of scale.
Right.
And of course, build their capacities enough to be able to operate in markets on their own terms.
Yeah. And what would you say needs to change in the supply chain part of for these commodities so that more and more of the value can actually stay with these communities versus what is maybe happening today?
Nothing needs to change. Visibility, as soon as we have visibility, I mean, like you said, you are not even aware that this economy exists.
Yeah.
And if there was, and of course we need these investments in mechanization, we need these investments in sort of simple storage solutions, drying solutions, as long as we are able to aggregate, nothing more needs to be done. The buyers are there, the consumers are there, the products are there, and once we make it possible for value to be created locally, then there will also be motivation to sort of reinvest their own profits into these supply chains.
Yeah. And I think that's where companies like us also come into the picture. So I think I want to end with one last question that I have. Is what is the opportunity for private sector companies like FarMart? Because clearly it's an industry we haven't been exploring so far. How big is the opportunity and why should every company be doing this today?
So I make the spiel, so I'm sort of used to this question as to why should we and so on. There are three big picture reasons, and then within that every company finds their niche. The first one is that everyone is looking for fossil fuel substitutes one way or the other. And they have to come from plants. A lot of these plants can come from agriculture, but then there are very clear trade-offs with food security. We cannot, especially with climate change, we cannot have our best farmlands be dedicated to things that are not growing food. So everything else should come from somewhere else. And 23% of our land in India is designated as forest land. Now we know how to use it responsibly and monitor it to make sure that it is not used unsustainably. If we can put in place those monitoring mechanisms, then our fossil fuel substitutes have to come from forests. It's inevitable. And there is growing need for this, there is growing demand for this, and I mean, we have to substitute paraffin, we have to substitute, so ethanol will come from bamboo, and compressed CNG will come from Napier grass, and so on. And I mean, we have to grow this somewhere, right? So the fossil fuel substitutes is going to be the big driver of sort of companies starting to look at forests. The second major one is that there is, in agriculture, there is something called yield gap, right? So rice and wheat, the yield gap is very low because there's been so much investment, there's only so much more yield you can increase by more research. The same concept, when applied to value, is much more relevant for forest products. So that is where the yield gap is greatest, where the investment will yield the greatest returns compared to agriculture, right? Especially the major commodities.
Right.
If you are looking at scale, that is where the returns are to investment. If you sort of, and I'm talking about sort of cross-section of industry. If you're looking for simple mechanization solutions, so if you think, and this is something that we are working with IIT Delhi and a local manufacturer, the salt seed falls on the ground, it has to be collected. All you need is a vacuum pump. It's like a vacuum cleaner. Why should it be only middle-class urban people who use a vacuum cleaner? Why not a poor woman in Simdega district use it to collect salt seeds? But it needs to be calibrated. And once it shows that it is a reasonable return, then there is a market for it. And it doesn't need to be as sophisticated or as slick as our vacuum cleaners are, as long as it works and it does the work. And there are so many other such examples.
Right. I'm going to open it up to everyone here. If you have any questions for Sir, for Professor. Anyone? Any questions? You've heard us talk for about 30 minutes now. Anything else you want to know? And we'll accept questions from people joining online also, so please feel free to put them in the chat.
Climate change and securitization in terms of, making the same yield gap convert in the forest economy like we've done in the farm economy. And contrasting this with climate change, what I want to ask is, as we see climate changing and, climate becoming more unpredictable, how do you justify or mitigate the risk of going more towards a forest-based economy when our food security is not something that is secured in, let's say, the next 10 or 20 years?
I will make the opposite argument, is that we cannot grow not food on agricultural land because we know that our farm yields are going to decrease with climate change. So if we want other fossil fuel substitutes that are plant-based, it has to come from non-farm land and therefore forest. The second part is that climate impacts on forests are more mediated, more regulated, more sort of balanced. Forest is far more able as an ecosystem to handle climate extremes than farmland is. So whatever we do with the forest, of course, we have to be very careful, and we have to take all our experience into account and sort of do it slowly and make sure that we don't create monsters. But what we do on forest land is much less likely to actually harm either the climate or the forest compared to farmland. It's just that for 50 years we have been trained to only think of forest as something that deserves to be protected. That's all. So that switch needs to flip.
Yeah. Yes, please.
What are the feasible way by which we can directly transfer the benefit to the original dweller of forest and by eliminating the middlemen?
Middlemen play a very important role. So I don't generally participate in bashing the middlemen, because if the middlemen were not there, the forest dwellers would not even get what they are getting now. Right? Of course, they are usurious, they do all kinds of bad things, and so do big corporations. Right? So they don't have a monopoly on being bad. What middlemen do is assume risk. They are the ones who actually, because the poor cannot undertake risk. The woman who brings in 10 kilos of sal seeds or amla, bheda, harda, whatever it is, she needs to be paid right now. She doesn't care that if she can keep it for 3 months, the price will be 30% higher and so on. Right? But that is speculation. It's the middleman that will sort of assume the risk of the price not increasing 30%, but having to spend money to store it in a way that will actually be sellable later. Right? So middlemen are providing an important service. We don't want to remove them. What we want is to reduce the arbitrage so that more value is captured at the local level. That's all that they're doing. Arbitrage.
To all the questions, we'll proceed with the signing of the MOU.
Sure.
Which is the star of this event today. So I'd love to invite Anirudh. He's our head of finance, and he'll do the honors along with you to do the signing. Yes, please.
This can be filled out.
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be 2 of these? Usually.
Should there be? Oh yeah, you're right. We'll make a copy.
Great. You can do that later.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. And I think it was a very interesting session for all of us. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I guess I'm particularly very excited for this collaboration. I hope we're able to scale it a lot more than we have already. And yeah,
much more, yes.
looking forward to collaborating.